One of the things that we talked about was, what people should do in dying towns. They're in areas where the industry has left. What should they do? They're experiencing difficulty. And I was saying that telling people that the jobs are coming back falsely is not going to actually do anything for them. That the only thing that you're guaranteed in America or in a free country is the adventure, right? That's what you're guaranteed. And that's also what makes life meaningful, is that sense of adventure. That's what America was built on, right? That's the fundamental command, the very first command that Abraham has ever given, is get up, leave the land of your fathers where you're comfortable, and go someplace where I'm not even going to tell you where you're going. You're just going to go there, and then when you get there, maybe you'll know, right? But I think that one of the areas, Jordan, where you and I think it would be interesting to drill down is when it comes to directing toward the purpose. How do we define what the purpose is? Because I think one of the things that's been difficult in the West, at least since the death of the Judeo-Christian value system in many ways, or at least we're running on the fumes of the Judeo-Christian value system is the truth. But since the decline of the importance in many people's minds of that value system, the decline of biblical living, has been this idea you can create your own meaning. Yeah, right. You just that if you find something that you truly care about, and then you pursue that thing that you truly care about, this will bring you happiness. And that may be true for a certain number of people, but the vast majority of people are incredibly crappy at coming up with their own meanings. Yeah. There has to be something that is out there that is discoverable in order for it to be discovered. I think
that's what the psychoanalysts, that's why I like Jung so much, because that's what made him such an astute critic of Nietzsche. Because Nietzsche believed we had to create our own values. But the psychoanalysts, starting with Freud, started to note that the values were actually built in. And Freud saw that, first of all, in dreams. Right, and then Jung took that apart and associated the dreams with the myths and said, no, you don't understand, is that the values are built in. You don't create them, you can rediscover them. And that's the resurrection of the father from the belly of the beast.
This does raise a question as to, and you and I have discussed this before, is where exactly that moral system comes from. So Kant obviously talks about the idea that he believes in God because of the starry sky above and the moral law within. You can discover all this within. I am not convinced that human beings can actually discover meaning within, because if that were true, then the prosperity and liberalism and human rights and value for individuals and all the things that we associate with the good stuff in the West, that would have been universal. And it is not, in fact, universal. It arose at a certain time in a particular place associated with a particular value system. This is why when people ask me about why I think that revelation is necessary, why it's important, it's because I think that without you're going to have to make these fundamental assumptions. To get from point A to point B, you're going to have to make fundamental assumptions at point A. Now, you can either get that from revelation, or you can just assume it, and then try to explain where those assumptions came from, or you can just pretend those assumptions don't exist, which is, I think, actually what Sam sort of does. And I hate to criticize Sam in his absence, but I think that Sam sort of just assumes that when he says things like, we're here for the greater flourishing of human beings, you actually have to define every one of those terms. There are a bunch of assumptions baked into what all of that means that he's making, and I'm not sure that Sam will acknowledge he's making them. But that's why, to me, and this is sort of thesis of my book next year, the West is built on the basic revelations of Jerusalem, meaning human beings are made in God's image with individual value and with individual purpose, and with a collective purpose where we get together and we pursue living in a more virtuous way. And that's one pole. And the other pole is the reason of Greece, where we have the capacity to look at the world around us and draw conclusions from that world. And on those poles are built all of modern science, are built all of economics, are built the free speech and free lives that we live right now. And I think that we have been gradually, over the last 200 years, chipping away at both of those poles, Jerusalem in terms of revelation and Athens in terms of reason, which we've abandoned for postmodernism, and that's just deprived us of purpose.
So in a weird way, is this the failure of the Enlightenment liberals? All the people that I grew up loving and caring about, and the people that I still admire, and this little sliver of liberals that still remain, that haven't bought into leftist dogma, but that aren't necessarily religious per se, or believe in these stories, but really they believe it comes from the Enlightenment period.
I think I think that's a good observation.
So that this is sort of their failure. And I'm not blaming
It's their arrogance, I would say, because even people like,
there's not enough in the secular world to fight this new religion.
No,
that's where I'm sort of finding myself right now, which is an incredibly uncomfortable place. I come from a much more atheist perspective, obviously, than you, and certainly where you are. And yet I can see what the future is now. And it's like, there's nothing left over there. And we do need some fundamental truths. That's just the position that I've been cornered into.
You can't have the Enlightenment without the mythos underneath it.
Exactly.
You see, so this is where you and Sam disagree,
and also
right?
where I disagree with people like Steven Pinker.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm an Enlightenment guy, but the thing is that when I look backwards in time, you know, what people like Harris and Pinker attribute to the Enlightenment, I see as the Enlightenment being the latest flowering of a process that was indescribably older than that.
This is exactly right.
And in the historical sense, certainly grounded in the religious traditions, but and then from my perspective, grounded in something that's biological, that's far deeper than that, like our true proclivity towards admiration for competence and reciprocity. And I do think that has to be socialized, back to your point. So I wanted, one of the things Dave mentioned before we started this was that we could have a bit of a conversation about the difference between Judaism and Christianity in terms of...
I'd love to get to that. I do want to make one comment on the Neo-Enlightenment stuff. So I mean, I will say that there is a full chapter in my book that is specifically about the views of a lot of people who I love, you know, Sam and Michael Shermer and, and Pinker and the whole Neo-Enlightenment strain of thought that I think kind of includes Jonah Goldberg on the conservative side.
Yeah. And I love these guys, and I feel, intellectually, I feel more comfortable with that position, but I realize I'm just being whittled away. I just see it can't hold much longer.
So here's my basic view and my basic thesis, is that there are two views of the Enlightenment. One is that, in Jonah Goldberg's words, it was the miracle, that it kind of sprang from nowhere. Suddenly reason dominated over revelation, and it crushed revelation, and in the wake of that crushing came the full flowering of economics and humanity and freedom and liberalism.
And that those things were opposed, reason and revelation were opposed.
Exactly, these were, and not only that they weren't in tension, they were fulsomely opposed. Because there's truth that reason and revelation are in tension, but it is also true that certain assumptions undergird the assumptions of reason. In order for you to believe that reason exists and isn't just an evolutionarily favorable firing of neurons, then you have to, if you like, I think that Sam's position that objective truth exists in the absence of anything remotely approaching a system of assumptions is unsupportable. It's completely unsupportable. I think that because you are built to create more little copies of you, right? I mean, this is, evolutionarily speaking, what you are created to do. How that has to do with discovering objective truth is utterly beyond me. And what it has to do with the existence of objective truth. In any case, the Enlightenment is based on certain fundamental assumptions. It's based on the idea that you can act as an individual freely by making rational decisions in a predictable world of laws, right? Every one of those assumptions is ungrounded in a world of pure scientific determinism. It just doesn't exist. So the Enlightenment actually ate itself. The Enlightenment ate itself. What happened is that the Enlightenment was, and I think that you see this in Kant, Kant sees all of this. He sees that this struggle is coming, and so he attempts to re-inject religion and spirituality and God back into a moral system without actually saying so, right? Kant is not actually an atheist. Kant is actually trying to create a rational basis for Christian revelation and Christian reasoning so that he can avoid the trap of having to cite the Bible, but he can say that all of this makes sense anyway.
Well,